Hey guys, how are you? This is day 2 in a row of me doing a video, but I got asked to talk about a certain kind of trauma that I experienced. And I know that those in healthcare can definitely relate to what I'm about to say and what I'm about to talk about. So, yeah. I'm going to be talking about my experience as a healthcare worker during the COVID-19 pandemic and how what I had to do, what I experienced, what I witnessed, and everything in between has affected me even to this day, even though I am no longer an active healthcare worker. So bear with me because this is going to be kind of emotional for me. I'm still working through a lot of the trauma with my my outside therapist and people in my program, so bear with me. So when COVID hit in late March, early April of 2020, my life had already turned upside down. My last remaining grandparent was diagnosed with cancer, and within 12 hours of getting her COVID-19 diagnosis, she passed away. And that has lived with me every single day that I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get the closure that I felt like I needed. I didn't get the closure that I felt like I was, entitled to, because she was my grandmother. But, yeah. So a week later, we put her in the ground. And then a week after that, my husband and I did end up getting married. And we set up a little memorial table for only, for the people that, we had lost. But my life was already thrown into chaos. A week before I got married, I contracted COVID-19 from working in a nursing home on a COVID unit. Like at that point in time, they were just starting to get a few cases. And yeah. So my life had already turned upside down the minute that my grandmother took her last breath. And then, me saying my vows in a mask, it definitely, it wasn't the wedding that I wanted, but my grandmother would have wanted us to continue pushing on and make the day special anyways. So then moving forward, after I was recovered from COVID, I ended up going back to that nursing home and working the COVID unit from start to finish pretty much by myself as the only CNA. And I worked, it was me, a nurse, and right down to the end, it was me, a nurse, and 15 patients, 15 COVID patients on that one hall. Everyone else in the unit was clear, so it was just me, a really great nurse, and those patients that were still very, very sick. In July of 2020, I received a job offer to work at a local hospital, and I jumped at the opportunity because it would have given me more experience as a CNA instead of just working in nursing homes and assisted living facilities or doing home care. So I jumped at the opportunity. But boy, was I in for a rude awakening when I got there. I was immediately thrust into working night shift. I agreed to night shift, and I did pretty well on it. And it was not the easiest thing to do, working a COVID unit on night shift by myself. It was me and 3 nurses. And my first exposure to someone who had to be intubated was, I'd say, a couple months down the road, working at the hospital. I enjoyed learning new things and getting to work with some of the most amazing nurses that I have ever had the pleasure of working with. I learned so much, and I was even adopted by one of the nurses as her work daughter. But here's where the trauma comes in. My first COVID patient that passed away. I watched this person literally suffer right up until the very end. And I have done many post-mortem care on many people up until that point. But it's different when you see someone that's not just dying of old age, and you see someone who is young, like around your age, suffering and losing their life. And to know that there was only so much that you could do to save that person, or keep them alive long enough for their loved ones to get there. It hurt. It really, really hurt. Once things started picking up with the hospital and taking in more COVID patients, my thick skin was developed. But the pain of seeing person after person after person lose their life in such a short period of time and in such a rapid succession, it was undeniably damaging to my mental health. And it made me have a breakdown in, I want to say, July of 2021. It was my first year working at the hospital. Now, I'm grateful for my time at the hospital. I'm grateful for my time there after, being able to float to different units, learning how to, work at a tele unit, the ICU, learn the process of the ER, sitting with psych patients. And, I was on med surg and, taking care of, people who are just, need to be there for non-COVID related illnesses to, post-op patients. I learned a lot, but seeing someone pass away in one room and you have to do post-mortem care, and then once you're done and that person is taken down to the morgue, having to step out of that room, put a mask on, and I mean this like as a metaphorical mask, and go into the next room with a smile on your face because the other patient is still very well living, and you have to hide your emotions of everything that you just saw, everything that you just did. It was brutal. The only time that I was ever actually able to feel my emotions was at the end of my shifts. And I remember so many days just driving home without the music on and just sitting there in my thoughts. And half the time I don't even remember how I got home safely. And there are some patients that really touched my heart when I was working there. Patients who, they had so much life left in them, but it was robbed by COVID-19. Seeing people that had a pretty good shot at life and then get very, very sick with COVID, it was just heartbreaking. And then they tell you not to take it home with you. They 100% tell you not to take it home with you. But it's kind of hard to do when every time you shut your eyes at night, you see the faces of every single person that you ever lost. I can remember quite a few patients who looked at me and said, "I don't want to die." And me having to say that everything's going to be okay, even though deep down you know that it's not going to be. And even though you know that you're probably going to be the last person that they saw before they took their last breath. it damaged me. It's been rough for me. In 2021, I had a severe panic attack while on shift. And I ended up cussing out all 3 of my nurses, who told me just to calm down and it'll be fine. And then my supervisor was doing her rounds and she came up to the floor. And when she saw me, I was pale. My eyes were completely black. I was shaking. And the nurses told her what was going on and how I had just completely unleashed on them and cussed them out and was really, really hard on them, really, really rude. And to those nurses, I'm so sorry for doing that. But my supervisor sent me home for the rest of the night and told me to go get a mental health evaluation the next morning. And I did. I emailed my unit manager that night and told her what was going on, what happened, and that if she had any questions, she could refer to the supervisor from the night shift. And I was put into my first partial hospitalization program, doing outpatient therapy. That was the first time I've done outpatient, because I thought for sure that I was going to end up in an inpatient psych hospital. So upon returning to work after completing the program, I moved from night shift to day shift, thinking that, since my sleep hours will be better, I'll be fine and it won't be as bad. They threw me back into the lion's den, and about 6 months later, I broke down again. So I went back to that program, and I completed it with flying colors, and I learned a lot, and I thought that I was going to be ready and, just ready to go back to work. And I ended up putting in my resignation from the hospital because they told me that they were so short-staffed that I would be on my own a lot of the time. And that would have left me being the only CNA, 5, maybe 6 nurses if you're lucky, on day shift to 30 patients, if not more. And the panic set in, and that's why I decided to resign. It wasn't for lack of love for my coworkers, who I'm trauma bonded with. It was for my own sense of peace, which I'm still trying to get back. My last day as an active CNA at that hospital, I took care of a patient who I will never ever forget. And I can't get into too many details because of HIPAA, but this one was the most traumatic for me. I literally watched this man, who I will say was not able to communicate. I watched him turn blue. I was in his room watching the monitors like I was supposed to. And it didn't matter how many times I called the doctor in. The doctor really wouldn't respond. The doctor quite literally just said, "Oh, we'll just increase his oxygen and he'll be fine." But I watched this man crash. To the point where he was literally like 5 shades of blue. And you could tell that there was fear in his eyes. because in a way, I think he knew that he wasn't going to make it. But I called the code. I had had enough, and I called the code. His O2 was way lower than it should have been. And they had to emergency intubate him right there in the room in order for him to get down to the ICU. And I was so persistent in making sure that he was able to live, that once we got him down to the ICU, that same doctor looked at me and said, "I will never underestimate you ever again." And I said, "You should never underestimate any CNA ever again." I still think about that man. I don't know if he lived or died. But just seeing him suffer and seeing pain in his eyes, and knowing that as a CNA there was only so much I could do, it still haunts me. And there were times when, say, family members didn't agree with, their loved one even getting IV fluids, or us doing oral care on them, on their loved ones. But I still hear the guttural screams of family members. I still hear those screams. I still hear them every day, knowing that their loved one is not coming back. And that there was nothing else that I could do for it but offer a shoulder to cry on. My condolences. Because then you have to put on a mask. You have to put that mask on. And you have to show up and smile for the next patient. And that's what nobody talks about. No one talks about the pain. No one talks about the silent rides home. No one talks about the nights that you're up all night crying your eyes out. And then you having to dread going into work the next day because you know exactly what you're walking into. That's why I left. I went to home care after that. And then I found out that I was pregnant. And my daughter literally saved my life. Because I was much better taken care of. And the stress wasn't as bad. And I didn't have any COVID patients. I was just taking care of people, lovely people in their homes. But the screams and the flashbacks and the nightmares, they still happen. 100% they still happen. And I wish that the world would see it. I wish that the world would have a better understanding of what we actually went through. And now that COVID cases are on the rise again, what people are still going through. I am trauma bonded with all of my former coworkers. We occasionally still talk about those days when we just didn't have the fight left in us. And that's why I left being a CNA. Because I don't think I could have dealt with losing another person the way that I did. So that's a little bit about my COVID trauma. I'm still working through this every day. But I've learned to let go of some of that pain. But I'm gonna be honest, it still hurts. And I've done another 5 outpatient hospitalization programs since, because that kind of trauma stays with you. It's not something that you can easily get over. I'm gonna end this video with thank you all for watching, and stay strong and stay blessed.